Welcome into Daily Faceoff Live, your go-to source for everything hockey. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Daily Faceoff Live. It's a Friday the 13th edition, Friday, January 13th. He is Daily Faceoff managing editor and senior writer Matt Larkin. Matt, how you doing, bud?
I'm good. I forgot it was Friday the 13th. Now it's going to be in my head. I'm thinking about Jason Voorhees, maybe a movie marathon.
Yeah, hopefully no stranger things happen to you today. Let's throw 2 minutes and 30 seconds up on the clock, and let's start today's show by welcoming the Seattle Kraken to the 2023 Stanley Cup playoffs. Does that sound like a bold take? I don't think so, because before this 11-day road trip started, Matt, I called it season defining for the Seattle Kraken. And what have they gone out and done? Absolutely blown off the doors of everyone on this 7-game trip. Look at these games. Look at these scores. The sixth game of which on Thursday night, they hand the Boston Bruins their first regulation loss on home ice all season long, including the Winter Classic, outscoring their opponents 29-10 on this run that included a tear through Canada and now has dipped into the U.S., culminating on Saturday in Chicago. Matt, does this get the Kraken in? Almost mathematically, they only need to go like 500 hockey the rest of the way to get to 96 points.
That's right. And there's 7 games up on the Calgary Flames, and they have 2 games in hand. And now we can't even just talk about the Kraken as a wildcard team. This is a team that's comfortably nestled in the Pacific and could even challenge for the division title, only 4 points out. And it's almost like this is the version of the Kraken I think a lot of people expected to see last year. This year, everything is coming together, and they don't have a superstar. They don't have a single player who's a point per game, but they have, I think it's 6 players already with double-digit goals. And this is the best 5-on-5 offensive team in the NHL. Number 3 overall offense, but at 5-on-5, absolutely dominant. And what fascinates me about the Kraken this year, it's not just the expected guys that are the leaders, not just Matty Beniers or new additions like Andre Burakovsky. You're seeing career best work from guys like Adam Larsson, Vince Dunn, who I pegged as a breakout candidate on pace for 60 points. So you're seeing just very varied contributions throughout that lineup, and it's sort of a death of 1,000 cuts attack rather than a superstar-based system.
Yeah, I mean, who saw a 40-goal season coming from Jared McCann, and a team that now has 11 players who have scored 20 or more points in the first half of the season? As you said, death by 1,000 cuts approach. When it comes to the deadline, I think the next question is, how big of a buyer should the Kraken be? Should they be more conservative, which I think is in Ron Francis's nature? I kind of look at this group and say they need a goaltender. Like, what would happen? What would this team look like if they got league average or above in goaltending, which they're still both goalies under 900 save percentage?
That's right, Frank. I wrote down the same thing, and I don't understand how this team has been this dominant with goaltending that's so subpar. So if you're Ron Francis, maybe you don't have to go all in this season, but I think it would be fair to this group to see if you can get an upgrade. Maybe it's a cheap upgrade. You don't have to swing for the fences, but someone in the tier like a James Reimer to solidify that crease would be very interesting to me.
Yeah, it's the goaltending market seems to be a little bit depressed this year as well. Not as many teams are in it. We'll see how that changes over the next 50 days until the NHL's trade deadline. As you mentioned, the Kraken just 4 points off of the division leading Vegas Golden Knights with 2 games in hand. Almost a be careful what you wish for scenario when it comes to winning the Pacific Division, because that means you're likely going to get one of Calgary, Edmonton, or the Colorado Avalanche in the first round of the playoffs, which could be interesting in and of itself. So let's talk about those Avs, and do they actually get in? My question for you, after they lose to the Chicago Blackhawks on Thursday night, as the Blackhawks this week have wreaked havoc on the Western Conference wildcard race, handing the Calgary Flames a tough loss on Sunday night as well. What is your level of concern for the Colorado Avalanche on a 1 to 10 scale at this point in the season, knowing how many guys that they've been missing due to injury?
I think it's elevated now to a 7 because there has been discussion, of course, the Avs are getting a little bit healthier now. You have Nathan McKinnon back as that anchor, but you're still missing Gabriel Landeskog. You're still missing Valerie Nichushkin, Bowen Byram, Josh Manson. These are key cogs of the Stanley Cup winning team from last year, especially in that top 6. And if you look at the depth chart right now, what's scaring me is that you have everybody in that lineup playing higher than he should be, whether it's Alex Newhook and JT Compher in the top 6. Their third line right now looks like a fourth line, and their fourth line right now looks like an AHL line. So the depth is really depleted. And I'm most concerned right now about Alexander Georgiev. Last 7 games, .882 save percentage. He's 3 starts away from setting a career high in starts. The workload is unprecedented for him, and maybe he's starting to break down. So I am a little bit nervous right now.
I'm going to give it a 5. And the only reason that number is that high for me is because I've been listening to their coach, Jared Bednar, who said last week, I hope we're not going to rely on the success of last season in order to try and get us into the playoffs this year. He seemed to be sounding a little bit of an alarm. But for me, I look at this group, I look at the players that they're going to get back. It's going to solve some of the depth issues that you were just talking about. I mean, look at just getting Josh Manson and Bowen Byram on their back end back into the lineup. That's going to free up Cale Makar to go back to being, 90-point defenseman Cale Makar, as opposed to just the point per game guy that he's been, having played 30 minutes a night this season. He's needed to be way more efficient. I think it's going to solve some of their depth issues. And then moving forward, this is a team that could just as easily reel off 12 straight wins without blinking and all of a sudden put some teams in the standings in their rearview mirror. I think still pretty firmly a wild card team. They've hung in tough that I don't know that anyone, maybe outside of Washington, not just in terms of quantity, but also quality of injured players that have been missing from their lineup this season. The Caps are kind of the only team close. And I think the fact that the Avs have been able to hang in there to this point is a tip of the cap to the guys that have been doing the heavy lifting. Our deadline countdown series continues on dailyfaceoff.com today, Matt. I will have a full and complete player profile up of Erik Karlsson. We've had some really good ones this week, a team playbook of the New York Rangers yesterday, a breakdown of Jacob Chychrun and his game, and the ask. And so since we're on the topic of Karlsson, it was reported earlier this week that the San Jose Sharks are seeking 3 first-round picks in exchange for Erik Karlsson, and they're willing to retain 18% on Karlsson's $11.5 million deal, which would knock him down to somewhere in the range of $9.4 million for each of the next 4 seasons beyond this one. No one's questioning what Erik Karlsson can do on the ice, one of the elite offensive defensemen of his generation, and probably a Hall of Famer, at least on that track with the 2 Norris trophies. But when you consider the ask and the contract, are the Sharks dreaming in Technicolor?
I believe they are. And it's amazing what he's done this year. Of course, on pace to be the first 100-point defenseman since 91-92. But what's most amazing to me is that he has stayed healthy. His body has not been the same since he had that ankle bone. He had part of it removed in 2017. It's amazing that he was able to stay in the league and still be an above-average player after that. So I'm very worried about him for his future. This contract goes until he's 37 years old. It's a buyout-proof contract as well, as far as I can see, looking around at those numbers. So if you're acquiring him, it's already a steep price with 3 first-round picks. But are you willing to have this player for that many more seasons? He's 32 now. You're paying him until he's 37. You're going to get maybe 1 or 2 more years at this level. Then the injuries are very likely to pile up again. So I think it's a big ask. The only scenario in which I could see this working is if there's a wink and you're planning to place him on LTIR in 2 years. If you can pull that off, have a little handshake agreement with Mr. Karlsson, then maybe you do it. But otherwise, I think it's a little too complicated.
Come on, things like that never happen in the NHL.
Of course, in this league, never, of course.
So, I mean, here's the thing. I think someone would be willing to take a risk on Karlsson at that contract, but they're not giving up 3 first-round picks to do it. I don't even think they're giving up multiple first-round picks to do it. The teams that I've talked to that have been sort of mildly interested is the way I would talk. I would basically handicap their interest. At this point, they're like, I would take on the contract. The Sharks could retain 18%, and I'd expect him to kind of come free after that. And that's not really something that the Sharks, I think, are interested in doing. And I think where the math gets tougher, Matt, is trying to figure out how many teams could actually afford Erik Karlsson even at $9.4 million. This is not a deal you can run through a third-party broker with the number of years left. No one wants to do that, and it's really expensive. That's more first-round picks out the window. So when you look at it, the only team I can come up with at this moment in time is the Ottawa Senators. And even then, I think it might be a bit of a reach to bring Erik Karlsson back to the nation's capital. Matt, Friday, our weekly buy a beer segment. Who are you going to raise a glass for? Who are you going to buy a beer for this week?
Oh, I'm really feeling for Max Pacioretty, and I just sort of wrote down a little diary of what he's gone through since the start of last season. So he plays 2 games, breaks his foot. Plays 14 games, wrist surgery. Plays 9 games, lower body injury. Plays 3 games, then it's an undisclosed injury. Plays 10 games, Achilles injury in the offseason, of course, cost him the first half. Gets back for 4 games, scores 3 goals, and he's hurt again. It doesn't sound like this one's really serious, but it's clear that this is a player, despite his considerable ability, even at 34 years old, his body's just breaking down. He has so much trouble staying healthy. And it's a shame because he still really is an important contributor on any team he plays for. Right now, of course, his new team, the Carolina Hurricanes, he's got 91 points in his last 91 games, dating back to the start of 2020-21. He's an effective player, but his body just does not cooperate. It has to be extremely frustrating for him. So here's a beer, Mr. Pacioretty. Feel better.
Yeah, it's also frustrating, has to be, for the Carolina Hurricanes. They acquire him last summer, then the Achilles injury happens. He's out until this calendar year, comes back last week, has 3 goals in 4 games, and then now is out again, to your point. With regards to Pacioretty and the injury, I believe it's a soft tissue injury, probably keeping him out, maybe a couple weeks in that neighborhood. And obviously the good news being that it's unrelated to the Achilles injury. That's always the scare, is that you end up having that pop or tear again. For me, I'm going to buy a beer for David Poile of the Nashville Predators. Mr. 3000, I joked with him when I saw him at the last NHL GM meetings, because he's the only general manager in NHL history to be around for 3,000 games. It's been an incredible career, but it kind of feels like he's at a crossroads here between a team in Nashville that I don't really know what they are. They started 2023 with a 4-1 record before losing on Thursday night. And what is this team in the mix? Are they out of the mix? Are you selling? Are you buying to try and boost their chances? Obviously, David Poile is someone that at his age is chasing that elusive Stanley Cup that he hasn't been able to get his fingerprints on for almost 40 consecutive years at the helm as an NHL general manager. And so I think you're kind of balancing all those things if you're David Poile, knowing that the clock is probably ticking on whenever your exit is from the Nashville Predators, the future of the franchise and where they're heading next, some of the tough and uncomfortable questions that you have to ask about the core. Who should we trade? Who should we keep? And then every time that you think that they're left for dead, they play themselves back into the mix. And so raise a glass and buy a beer for David Poile, because it's actually one GM job that I do not envy at the moment.
Yeah, it's tough. And what's that expression that you can you can just nickname hockey goaltending? And that's sort of what fuels the Predators. It's UC Saros, and it can sort of trick you, if you're a Predators fan, into thinking this team has some juice, but it's really just Saros being absolutely on fire and floating this team a little bit upward in the standings. It seems to happen every single year, and it's tough to live in the murky middle. It's tough to be patient if you're David Poile, like you said, but I think you have to go backward to go forward in this case.
Yeah, it's certainly a tough spot to be in. Let's get to our fantasy hockey talk this week with our guy, Nick Alberga. That's right. Some fantasy hockey talk with our guy, Nick Alberga from Leafs Morning Take, part of the Nation Network, delivered by our friends at Montana's. Nick, we were just talking about the Seattle Kraken. I officially welcome them to the 2023 Stanley Cup playoffs with the tear that they've been on this road trip. But how do you attack some of the Kraken players from a fantasy perspective? Not all of them exactly that sexy, because the Kraken don't have a point per game player, but they do have 11 guys on their roster with 20 points or more this season through the first half. Who catches your eye? Who would you have your eye on?
There's tons of value to untap right now when it comes to the Seattle Kraken, gents. Attack the crack is what I'm calling it. We'll start with Martin Jones. Back-to-back shutouts, 6 straight victories. I love the little revenge narrative against the Boston Bruins. If you guys recall, he was a B for like 6 seconds a couple years back. So he gets the shutout. The Bruins lose their first game in regulation on home ice. They have Chicago on Saturday. So certainly Martin Jones, I would look at him. Matty Beniers is a super rookie. I think he's the front runner again for the Calder Trophy. 9 points in his last 6. He's around 52% owned right now. Andrei Burakovsky has 7 points in the last 5, around 45% ownership. Then you keep going down, and there's still more value. Jordan Eberle's got 7 points in the last 5. And the last guy I would bring up who's really finding his way offensively as of late is Yanni Gourde. Yanni Hockey, I like to call him. 8 points in his last 7 outings.
I love the nickname Yanni Hockey. Nick, I wanted to ask you about something that comes up all the time in our mailbag that we do together. And people are just stressing over Carolina Hurricanes goaltending because you have Freddie Anderson back now. You have Antti Ranta. They're both pending UFAs. You have Pyotr Kochetkov, who's been amazing as rookie, but he's the only waiver exempt guy of the three. So how does that puzzle come together with three goalies there? What do you do if you're a Kochetkov owner in fantasy?
It's deja vu all over again, right? We experience this with Alex Nedeljkovic a couple of years ago when it came to Carolina and the three-headed goalie monster. And I think the one thing we realized, it never works, right? Even dating back to the New York Islanders. I think from a fantasy perspective, it stinks if you own either one of these guys, and more so obviously Freddie Anderson and Pyotr Kochetkov. I would lean towards more Freddie Anderson. There's a reason why they picked him up a couple of years ago. I understand injuries have been a concern with this guy, but last time I checked, he's due for a new contract following this season. So certainly I think wants to put himself in place for a big fat new check. So I would probably lean towards Freddie Anderson being the guy, the main starter, the main contributor, if you will, for the Carolina Hurricanes here in the second half. But I think they will be careful with his deployment. And lucky for them, they have Kochetkov, who has the option of going down to the AHL. Nobody wants to see that. And they have Antti Ranta, who gets banged up quite a bit too.
Yeah, I feel like Kochetkov, it's like Wolf of Wall Street. He's going nowhere. Like that guy has all he's done is win. So he's not going anywhere as far as I'm concerned. Love Kochetkov. Love the steadying influence for a team that desperately needs it, given that Ranta and Anderson seem to be always injured. And speaking of injuries, we've got a couple guys that are banged up. We just mentioned Max Pacioretty, probably not out too long, dealing with a soft tissue injury in his lower body. Chris Kreider, day to day. And when you look at who was the other guy? Mark Stone, also a little bit banged up as well for the Vegas Golden Knights. What concerns you the most from a fantasy perspective, and who would you have your eye on as a replacement?
Yeah, I'll be honest. The Mark Stone one scares the hell out of me. I don't know if it's a shoulder issue, but if it's anywhere directly near the shoulder, that is a scary situation for them. Of course, was forced to leave that game against the Florida Panthers on Thursday night. So we're looking at replacement options. On Broadway with Chris Kreider, I think you start with Alexis Lafreniere, who's getting his 300th opportunity, I think, to be in the top six at some point in time. It's either going to stick or be like, nah, I think you could be Alex Dagg again. But it's really early, guys. Teuvo Teravainen's another guy I would look at from a DFS standpoint when it comes to Carolina. Since Pacioretty came back, he's been on the fourth line. I think it's an easy promotion back to the top six for him. And I think you look at Vegas, there's a boatload of options. I think that, the biggest piece I would look at is Riley Smith, maybe a Phil Kessel. I think externally, there's a lot of intriguing names as well. Adrian Kempe's been pretty good recently for the LA Kings, 5 goals in his last 6. I would definitely look at Lucas Raymond of Detroit. He has 13 points in the last 11, including 3 points in that 4-1 victory against the Maple Leafs on Thursday night. I mentioned Eberle. And the last guy, when I tweeted this out last night, Frank, I can't wait to see who Tampa fleeces at this year's deadline. Brandon Hagel. He has 15 points in his last 13 games here.
Yeah, Hagel has, and on that contract too, ridiculous value for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Nick, where else can you get this kind of content? We had an Alex Dagg reference and a Yanni Hockey reference. I mean, just absolutely next level. So thank you for this week's edition of Fantasy Hockey Talk. You can catch Nick Monday to Friday on Leafs Morning Take, part of the Nation Network. And this Fantasy Hockey Talk has been delivered by Montana's. This season, Montana's is bringing back the viewing party with their new daily deals. You can check out their daily drink specials as well as their other weekday specials. Head on over to montanas.ca for more details. Thanks, Nick.
Anytime. Take care, guys.
All right, Matt, it's time for our Daily Faceoff inbox question of the day. Hashtag AskDFO. Hit us up on Twitter. We'd be happy to take your questions. And today I want to have a little fun. It's Friday. And given that there's been near constant daily drama surrounding the Vancouver Canucks from start to finish this season at the halfway point, the latest being Quinn Hughes criticizing the handling of Tanner Pearson's injury, Bruce Boudreau seemingly being waggled out there on a daily basis. I want you to pick a GIF to describe the Canucks season from a drama perspective.
Okay, I'm proud of this one. This is for you community fans out there. Donald Glover, Troy, walks in with a pizza. He's looking to have a good time, and everything is on fire. And that is how I felt going into this season. The vibes were good with Bruce Boudreau. 649 hockey last year. You signed Kuzmenko. You signed Mikheyev. You have Elias Pettersson, who had a great second half. JT Miller re-signed. All these positive vibes, and it's just an absolute mess. And you touched on a few things. Of course, we also had the Rachel Doerrie situation. And even before the season, at the media tour, Quinn Hughes made some cryptic comments implying that JT Miller was sort of off on his own, not really part of the team. So there's some tension there. Anything I've heard through the grapevine sounds like that is a broken room. So it's a mess. It's all on fire in Vancouver.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a different GIF, and I'm going to go with Michael Jackson eating popcorn. And it's just because I'm here for all this drama. Like, it at least gives us something to talk about in Vancouver that's not when and who will Bo Horvat be traded to, because those questions, they never end. And this is going to be a fascinating deadline for the Canucks. Also a fascinating week in franchise history, I would say, over the last 2 decades in terms of significance. What type of path do they chart forward this weekend at their pro and amateur scouting meetings in South Florida? I think it's a big time to make decisions for the Vancouver Canucks and where this franchise goes next. Got to get rid of the drama. I mean, we had it reported this week that the Canucks recently interviewed Rick Tocchet for their head coaching position, and no one even blinked. You were like, yeah, okay, whatever, par for the course this season. That the coach's job has been so openly speculated about, and there's been barbs and shots fired between coach and management through the media basically since October. It has become the theater of the bizarre in Vancouver. 2 fun gifts to get you going on a Friday. That brings us to our guy Tyler Yaremchuk for our Daily Faceoff Points Bet Daily Bets segment. And Tyler comes to us from the home of gambling, Las Vegas, also known as the City of Lost Wages. Tyler, how did you do on Thursday? What do you have for us on tap on Friday?
Well, thankfully, you didn't ask me how I did at the blackjack table last night, Frank, and we can just stick to the sports betting for this evening. But we did hit the Winnipeg Jets on the money line. Missed our other play yesterday, but we'll look to have a good Friday night, courtesy of our friends at PointsBet Canada. Relatively small slate tonight in the NHL, but I have a couple of plays that I don't mind, starting with that one at the top between the New Jersey Devils and the Anaheim Ducks. The Ducks have gotten absolutely blown out in their last 2 games, losing 6-2 to the Oilers, 7-1 to the Boston Bruins, and things aren't getting any easier. They're facing a New Jersey Devils team that not only beat the Carolina Hurricanes earlier this week, but covered the puck line in the process. The Ducks, in 6 of their last 10 games, have lost by 2 goals or more, and they've faced some bad teams over that stretch as well. So I like the Devils to cover the puck line at -125. Not a great payout, but I still think this is a decent spot for New Jersey. And then also, for my player prop today, I'm taking Jake Gensel to go over 2.5 shots. There have been points this season where this number's been juiced up to 3.5. You get it at 2.5. This guy's got 15 shots on goal in his last 3 games, and he's, as always, riding shotgun with Sidney Crosby. So I like taking Jake Gensel over 2.5 shots to go with the Devils on the puck line, Frank.
Tyler, can't wait to watch your adventures in Las Vegas from afar. The Oilers are there on Saturday night. Tyler's there as part of the hashtag Nation Vacation. So check out the hashtag and see what these guys are up to all weekend long, as I'm sure they'll get into absolutely no trouble. Tyler, have a blast. Have a great weekend and enjoy yourself. Thanks for our PointsBet Daily Bet segment. That brings us to Matt Larkin and Garbage Time. Matt, I was really proud of myself, and I have been all season long. One of my bold predictions this season: Rick Bowness wins the Jack Adams Award. And I was feeling really good about it until we did our mid-season awards voting on dailyfaceoff.com earlier this week. And Rick Bowness was not in the top 3, but in the also received votes category. And I go, huh? Is anyone watching what's going on in Winnipeg, that the entire roster didn't change at all, and yet the Jets have been stalking the Central Division lead all season long? Jim Montgomery, with all due respect, Matt, he comes in for a 107-point team last year, and they've gotten Linus Ullmark to be an incredible goalie and are on pace for 139 points this year. Where do you come out on the debate?
Okay, I'm going to load my bazooka here. First, fire a shot across the bow at Rick Bowness. Give the Jack Adams Award to Connor Hellebuyck, not Rick Bowness. The Jets are bottom 3rd defensive team in the NHL. What has changed this year is Connor Hellebuyck having a career year. That is why they are rising up in the standings. In Boston, this is the fastest team to 30 wins in 78 years. They have played 32% of the season without Charlie McAvoy. 20% of the season without Brad Marchand. Their biggest offseason additions were 36-year-old David Krejci comeback, Pavel Zacha, mostly the same group, depleted group on pace for an NHL record 64 wins. The biggest difference is Jim Montgomery. They're playing for him. He's an inspiring story, overcoming his demons, and that is your Jack Adams favorite right now.
Okay, so here's my rebuttal to that, is that any coach not named Bruce Cassidy would have gotten a lift out of the Boston Bruins because they just seem to be on such a different page. Like I said, 107-point team last year, just a good team, still being a good team. And I know they've taken it to the next level, but the Jets were one of the worst teams in the league last year, were way under expectations. There was turmoil heading in. They stripped Blake Wheeler of the captaincy. He got Josh Morrissey to suddenly become this offensive dynamo on pace for 90 points. Where did that come from in his career? He's always been known as a shutdown guy. I don't know. For me, with all due respect to Lindy Ruff and the Fire Lindy and Sorry Lindy chants, and what a great story that's been, and Bruce Cassidy, also a pretty good team that he gets to bounce back, and certainly I think deserving of some talk. I don't know. Rick Bowness, I don't know. He's my guy.
I understand it. And, I'm speaking with my tongue in cheek. I absolutely think that Rick Bowness is deserving of consideration. It's not just Connor Hellebuyck. I'm being facetious because especially with what you've seen from Josh Morrissey, unlocking the potential. This was a guy who was a good prospect, a first-round pick. I remember watching him as a World Junior. He was supposed to be this type of player, and it just, for whatever reason, it took him close to a decade to discover the potential that he always had. So I do think it's fair to point to coaching. We also have Mike McKenna, of course, our Mike McKenna with a column today on Daily Faceoff, just explaining what he's heard from other players, that Rick Bowness is this fatherly presence, someone you want to go to war for. So I do think from an emotional standpoint, you have seen a turnaround on a team that was in turmoil last year, for sure.
It'd be a pretty good story. Rick Bowness celebrating 2,600 NHL games behind a bench as a head coach or assistant or associate at this level. Pretty incredible number. Certainly a worthy debate for garbage time as well. Thanks to Matt Larkin. That's all the time we have for today's Daily Faceoff Live. Thanks to our boy Nick Alberga, as well as Tyler Yaremchuk, who felt like he was doing his hit today from his hotel bathroom. Always good fun for Tyler. We'll be back with you on Monday, 12 noon Eastern. You know where to find us. Until then, keep it locked on dailyfaceoff.com for all the latest news, insight, and analysis, as well as our deadline countdown series that will continue over the weekend. Thanks so much, and have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.